Maybe some of you watched the final show of the Colbert Report. You saw that fantastical rooftop scene where Santa arrives with both Abraham Lincoln and Alec Trebek. That's a whole other story, but Alec Trebek, of course, is the Jeopardy questioner, and Trebek, whom Colbert greeted in that sequence as the man with all the answers. He replied to Colbert's question about the meaning of life that all true wisdom comes in the form of questions. All true wisdom comes in the form of questions. Right out of the gate in Mark's Gospel, we get a question. What have you to do with me? It may be the question that really evokes the entire Bible. What have you to do with me? Maybe the question that could summarize really Jesus' whole life and ministry and death and resurrection. What have you to do with me? Is certainly found on the lips of folks like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden as they hid naked from the Lord. It pops up in the mouth of Isaac, questioning his father, Abraham, as they prepare for a sacrifice, but they don't seem to possess a sacrificial lamb or goat. What have you to do with me? It happens in the burning bush with Moses. What have you to do with me? The Israelites suffering more greatly now because Moses has intervened and Pharaoh has made their task harder, and they want to know, what have you to do with me? We hear the question in Egypt. We hear it in the plagues, in the Red Sea, at Sinai. What have you to do with me? We ask it. Read the newspaper or listen to the news reports. We may not ask it directly of Jesus, as seems to be the focus of our gospel today, but we ask it indirectly through others. We ask it and we seek an answer for people like Eric Garner or Michael Brown, or after the Charlie Hebdo assassinations, or of ISIS or Boko Haram, or every violent act that's designed to intimidate us. We ask that question underneath it all. What do you have to do with me? And that intimidation forms for us a kind of enslavement, doesn't it? A challenge to our freedoms and self-understandings and the idea of decency in the world. What have you to do with me? We get this question, articulated precisely that way, out of the mouth of a person that's possessed by a demon in the opening verses of Mark's Gospel. In fact, this is the opening act of Jesus' public ministry. Yes, he's been around a little bit. He's been baptized and he's on teaching, but now this is the opening act. It is in the Sabbath day, Jesus at the synagogue, where he spoke and people were amazed at his authority. Notice that the bookend of the story, we don't really hear what Jesus teaches. We only see what his authority enacts in people's lives. We don't hear the content of the authority. We see him act. That's really kind of how Mark spins Jesus anyways. It's really not about his words so much as about what he does and what he's about. Maybe another way to frame the question that's being asked today is this: what does Jesus' authority have to do with us? And as we'll see, Jesus' authority has plenty to do with us. This is Jesus' first public act in Mark's Gospel. Now, I know we've been 2 months into the readings of Mark's Gospel, and we've made it all the way to the 21st verse of the first chapter, 2 months into the reading of Mark's Gospel. Doesn't seem like we've made much headway, but that's kind of Mark too. It's all compressed. Every word is important. Nothing is wasted. He had a wonderful writer and editor of this story, which is probably Peter's evangelistic story. First events, which this is, kind of gives insight to wider themes in the Gospels, an understanding, a particularly distinct understanding of who Jesus is. We see that in all the Gospels. And in Matthew, Jesus is a teacher. He does a lot of teaching, and he's the new lawgiver. He's like a Moses come again. In John, he recreates unexpected and unimaginable abundance, starting with the first act of the wedding at Canaan. Why start with making wine out of water? I don't know, but it has something to do with unimaginable abundance. That's John's frame in which he's working. In Luke, Jesus is the one who says in the synagogue, we hear the sermon, and then in Acts, release for the captives, healing of the ill and the infirm, proclaiming good news to the poor, and the year of God's favor. In Mark, he starts with a confrontation. That's how it starts. Mark's gospel starts with a fight scene. It's kind of like a karate movie, if you will. They start fighting, and you're not even sure exactly why. But we're going to find out. It seems fitting then on Super Bowl Sunday that there would be a confrontation between powers. I summarized it, as Terry has already said, in the paper. My title for this was Supernatural Super Bowl. That's not quite how I would title this message I'm going to give, but I thought it was silly and funny for the paper. But it works. Whatever dramatic value beginning with a fight scene might initially promise, there is little doubt who's going to win this contest. It's not the Seahawks, it's not the Patriots, it's not Satan, but Jesus. The Spirit protests Jesus' very presence. That's odd, I think, because where are they located? They're in the synagogue. They're at church. And the demon protests Jesus' presence at church. Wow. That's not to say that the synagogue is an evil place. It's a reminder that even in church, people can be enslaved, right? People can be possessed by things that have nothing to do with God. Maybe even quite the opposite of God. One way to see this opening scene is as a signal that Jesus has come to oppose all the forces that keep God's children from the abundant life that God desires for them. So for you note takers, my first point. Are you ready? Okay. In Mark's gospel, distinctly, summarize it. You don't have to write distinctly. You'll spend a half an hour trying to figure out. Is that C then T or, okay. We see Jesus has come to oppose all the forces that keep God's children enslaved. In Mark's gospel, we come to see that Jesus opposes all the forces that keep God's children enslaved. God wants more for us from this life and stands in opposition to anything that robs us of the joy and community and purpose for which we were created. Now, I know we're 21st century Christians, so a story of exorcism seems a little odd, doesn't it? We're not quite sure what to make of it, an exorcism. But we can relate to the theme, can't we? Of things that rob us or enslave us or possess us. Provoke those things, and they will ask the question, what do you have to do with me? That question, once again, of course. There are any number of things that possess us. Think for a minute about some of the things that possess you. What are those first thoughts? What are those persistent thoughts? What are the things you can't get rid of? What are the things you can't stop thinking about? What are the things that's the thing that's wrong with you? The things that possess us, the primary objective that might be over God's claim in our life. Anger or fear or insecurity or workaholism or affluenza, in other words, materialism. Depression or substance abuse, and the list just goes on and on. If we collected a list, it would go on and on. Now, these are the real struggles that we face in our lives, in our culture, what it means to be who we are in this time and space. And there aren't easy answers to them, even though there seems to be a fairly easy solution in our supernatural Super Bowl in the gospel. However, in our gospel, for 21st century Christians, is the promise that God does not want these things for us, and that the church, when we are at our best, is a place where we can gather in Christ's name to support each other in escaping the things that are holding on to us so that we might grow to be a blessing because we've been blessed. God is concerned over the things that break us. God is concerned over the things that enslave us. And God, embodied in Jesus, is a God of the broken. And His church, at our best, is a fellowship of those who are in need and understand their need for God. That's why we have to keep coming back to church, because we go out into our lives and we get convinced that there are other truths about who we are and what we're supposed to be about. And they are lesser gods. And as I said last week, of opinions, they become idols. And what's a test of an idol? Eventually, they will call for human sacrifice. What are you sacrificing in your lives for lesser gods? This is the missional and the character of Jesus, the Son of God, whose story, just 20 verses earlier, we heard was the story of the good news of the Son of God. God doesn't blanch at real pain. He doesn't fade away at the struggle of our lives. The demon-possessed is right there in the middle of everything that should be good and righteous, right? Right there on a Sunday morning. Well, this would be a Friday night, probably, at synagogue. Messing things up. Right there, alive in the very presence of the place where we should be focused most upon God, are the things that mess us up with God. It's actually kind of a strange question because it's hard to render. The construction of the sentence could say, "What have you to do with us?" That's how it's usually rendered, at least in the NRSV. But it could say something like, "Why are you picking a fight with us?" Or maybe even, "Couldn't you have left things the way they were between us?" Wow. Now there's an unusual understanding. In other words, Mark's gospel is telling us that the alarm and the astonishment of the crowd in the synagogue at the end of Jesus' sermon, where they said, "Wow, this is quite the new teaching with authority," not like the scribes who are quoting traditions. This is an authoritative teaching, is the same alarm and astonishment on the part of the demon. In Jesus, things have changed. Second point, you ready? Okay. Even demons know that Jesus is the Son of God, but they have no faith. They don't trust Him. So, can we know things about Jesus, right? But do we have any faith in Him? Can we put our weight down on Him? Can we trust Him and trust His authority in this life? I heard somebody liken it to riding tandem on a bike, and they always wanted to be in front. Why would they want to be in front? They always wanted Jesus in the back to power it up, right? But they wanted to be the guy in the front because it wanted to be His purpose, His goals, His understanding, His direction, His moxie that got them where they needed to go. But when it was a time of trial, when it was a hill, He would always call back to the guy pedaling behind, "Jesus, pedal a little harder." He said the seats should have been exchanged. And that's what I mean by even demons know things about Jesus, but they don't trust. It's the same thing that we get caught up in, isn't it? We know things about Jesus, but it's difficult for us to trust, to actually put our weight down in Him. And so when times get tough or we aren't sure of the direction and we have to let go of those handlebars and give them over to the direction of someone else, we ask that question, don't we? What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Discipleship is not an easy walk, is it? We're invited to join Jesus in confrontations. That would be Mark's understanding of the Christian community too. We're invited into Jesus' confrontation with all that would separate us from God, with all in the world that would lead us away from God. We also are invited into that confrontation to trust Him in His name, that we can stand opposed with Him to all those things that oppress souls, yours and mine and others. The way of being a disciple of Jesus takes us through the heart of the world, not out of the world. It takes us sometimes into the worst places, the places of destruction and death. Not the easiest places, is it? How many of you have experienced discipleship as an easy call, an easy walk, an easy path? Seeing no hands, I'm either assuming there's no disciples or you find this stuff difficult too. Occasionally we find the easy place, don't we? Camp. Winter camp. Did you guys go to winter camp last week? Was it awesome? Okay. Camp is an easy place. Christian community, intentional community. Well, Emmaus. An easy place surrounded by folks of like-mindedness coming together for a weekend to focus on discipleship. The easy places, the places of the refuge of hope, the inns of recovery, the places of epiphany of purpose, and the unforgettable moments given to help us not stay on the mountaintop, but to embark into the journey of discipleship following the way of Jesus into the world. It's the best of what we can do for one another in the church as well. Is on Sunday morning there would be an epiphany of purpose, that we'd be an inn of recovery, that would be an opportunity of restored hope for one another. That's the best of what we are when we're together, and I challenge you to be that for one another. Stephen Colbert turned the final show. We know it's not going to be the final show, just with that character apparently, into something kind of like a festival. And then he used a song that I had not heard in a while. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Some of you that are the World War II generation may remember that song. It was a very, very popular song. It was a hit song during World War II, and it was sung for and sung by soldiers who were walking through the hellish way of death and destruction and a way of evil. We'll meet again. I don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? Mark wants us to understand that Jesus is with you in the difficulty of the way, in the hardship of your walk of faith, in the pain and the sorrow, the suffering and the joy, the happiness and the gain. He walks with us. The demon asks Jesus what he has to do with us and then says, have you come to mess things up? Have you come to put us away? Have you come to destroy us? Thinking about those men and women serving in World War II and in every battle since then and before, the presence of God in places like foxholes and battlefields and field hospitals, the military graveyards, and even cancer wards and other places, the presence of God, even there, is an unquestionable religious truth. We even make sort of fun of it, saying there are no atheists in foxholes. Because in the hellishness of life, we understand Mark's Jesus, who stands in confrontation with a world of violence and a world whose most powerful answer is death. And we'll see this confrontation come to a head 15 chapters back, when the world will do its worst to him. And the world's final answer will perceivably silence him forever. But Jesus, the great karate expert, will not let death have the final answer. Not on his final day, and not on ours. In all those places of difficulty and struggle, where hell makes brothers and sisters into a band of brothers and sisters, warriors, fellow soldiers, fellow strugglers, the question, what have you to do with me, becomes a profoundly answered question that only Jesus uniquely has the authority to answer. They know the truth about who Jesus is, the Holy One of God, but they do not trust him. Here's my third point. You ready? Oh, good. I thought maybe I lost you for a second. The demons know but don't trust, but you can. You can trust in the one who has authority over life and death, over sin and sorrow, over demons and angels. With Jesus, it's never a fair fight. It is a supernatural Super Bowl with the Bad News Bears playing the Patriots. I know it's different sports. And the venue is not in Phoenix. The venue is in your soul. The supernatural Super Bowl doesn't take place on television. It takes place in the millions of people who will be watching it and will be asking questions about what Jesus or what this means for our lives. Jesus has come to oppose anything that keeps us from God. He has authority to make it right, but only you can give him permission, and only you can trust. Jesus is trustworthy, for he has come to save. Amen.